Welcome to the Kyle Olson Show. On Monday, the Michigan Conservative Coalition held a press conference on the Capitol steps with attorney David Kallman, Carl Mahnke, and 3 of the 7 hairstylists who were cited for, quote, disorderly conduct during the recent Operation Haircut protest. I went to live stream the press conference for Breitbart News, which you can find on our Facebook page. I want to play you some of the highlights from that event. There are so many fantastic people in Michigan who understand what is at stake and are willing to fight not just for their rights, but for mine and yours. One of those people is Angela Regas. I spoke to her during the protest a couple weeks ago after she received her $1,000 citation for being disorderly. She shrugged it off. That was really the amazing thing. She just, that's all right. Here's what she told reporters on Monday.
A month ago, we took part in a legal and lawful and peaceful protest against the governor's unlawful and unjust executive orders. Orders closing our businesses, stopping our livelihoods, permanently closing some businesses that were not able to ride it out during this closure. The citations that we received on that day were a clear violation of our First Amendment rights, our rights to freedom of speech, freedom to assemble, freedom to go against the government when they are being unlawful. Those are God-given rights. The governor's duty is to protect those rights, not to write orders against those very rights. Now she's making an example out of us. In the future, this basically states if you do not comply, you will be punished. That's not the way our government works. The governor's job is to protect our rights. Don't ever forget that. The God-given rights in the Constitution, those are our rights, and they shall never be taken away by the government.
Can you imagine having a legislature full of Angela Regases? Can you imagine how different the fight to protect our rights from overlords like Gretchen Whitmer would be? I can guarantee you that message that she just delivered to the media went right over their heads. That, what she said, was a foreign language. I spoke to Angela after the event, and here's that. So what message do you think they're trying to send by prosecuting you and the others?
You know, I think about Boston, right before the revolution. And the redcoats, were trying to force the rebels to comply or be punished. That's all I think about during this time. It's historic. It's historic. We will not comply. We will not comply to this.
Isn't that amazing? Can you imagine her in a position of political power? Attorney David Kallman and the stylists also spoke to reporters. I filmed Carl Mahnke talking to a couple mainstream reporters, including one from WLNS in Lansing. Here's Mahnke's exchange with Ashley Graham. It's hard to understand her because she's wearing a mask and there's lots of ambient noise, so I'll play it and then interpret it for you.
I'm essential. Who is to tell me that my business is not essential? It's essential to number one to my living. To what? Sustaining life? Yeah, I mean, this is all part of who we are as individuals. When our governor locked us down, she locked us down physically and says, I'm going to take care of you. Just stay in your house physically. There's another component to us. There's a mental and there's a spiritual component to each one of us. You lock somebody up in their house, and they took that absolute as gospel truth from the governor. 6 months later, 6 weeks later, 3 months later, you're going to have a very vacated human being.
He was talking about his business, and she said, quote, do you believe it's essential to sustaining life? I'm sorry, what? Even he seemed taken aback. Let's play it again.
I'm essential. Who is to tell me that my business is not essential? It's essential to number one to my living. To what? Sustaining life? Yeah, I mean, this is all part of who we are as individuals. When our governor locked us down, she locked us down physically and says, I'm going to take care of you. Just stay in your house physically. There's another component to us. There's a mental and there's a spiritual component to each one of us. You lock somebody up in their house, and they took that absolute as gospel truth from the governor. 6 months later, 6 weeks later, 3 months later, you're going to have a very vacated human being.
A mainstream TV reporter who may be the very definition of non-essential to sustaining life has the audacity to ask that man that question. Who the hell does she think she is? Does anybody think TV reporters are essential to sustaining life? Anybody? Is that really the debate we want to have, they want to have? Speaking of the mainstream media, there was a protest last week in Lansing, as there are pretty much every night these days. So a group of about 30 people representing Black Lives Matter blocked the intersection of Michigan Avenue and Foster Street. They live-streamed the whole thing on Facebook, because isn't that what everybody does now? A couple of protesters were open carrying, which of course is legal. That's their right. The video showed a motorcyclist who approached and wanted to cross Michigan Avenue, which is his right to do since, it's a public road. The protesters who were illegally occupying the intersection wouldn't allow him. He didn't approach hostilely. He just wanted to cross. He probably didn't understand what was happening or why these people were blocking the road. Two of the agitators pointed their guns at him as he argued with Paul Birdsong, the organizer. Remember that name. Lansing police were positioned a half a block away, you can see it in the video, and did nothing. Later that night, during the same live stream, the whole group blocked the entire width of the road and walked west towards the Capitol. A driver was attempting to use Michigan Avenue because it's his right, and it's a major thoroughfare, and he was driving east. It's not clear from the video whether Paul Birdsong deliberately wedged his legs under the car's front bumper or the driver bumped into him, but either way, guns were out, the driver put his hands up, literally, in surrender, and the agitators were attempting to intimidate him into not using the public roadway. Again, police did nothing. I wrote about this on Breitbart. You can find it all there. Steve Gruber sent me a message he received from one of his listeners. The person sent my story to the Lansing State Journal, and the paper responded to that person, quote, Breitbart is not a reliable news source, and this story is not accurate. This video was taken early last week, not Friday, in parentheses, the paper responded. The video was published on Friday, and so I said it was posted Friday. Ultimately, does that detail even matter? No. But as I often do with any one of these other video posts that I write, I describe the situation and quote the individuals involved. The reader can draw their own conclusion. That's called journalism, at least how I understand it. Maybe the Lansing State Journal has a different standard and definition. Here was the paper's excuse for not reporting on the incident. Quote, we cannot possibly cover every negative interaction drivers and protesters have with each other. It's not uncommon. Unless it rises to the level of someone getting hurt, we likely will not cover it because we just don't have the time or the resources for it. Oh, that poor newspaper. Just too busy to cover agitators pointing guns as citizens just trying to use a public road. And no one, of course, is asking you to cover every negative interaction. I can guarantee you if one of those armed protesters who, quote, stormed the Capitol a few weeks ago had pointed their guns at anyone, the Lansing State Journal, hell, the Attorney General would have been all over that. But you know what they had time for? A massive profile piece on agitator, organizer, Paul Birdsong. It reveals the Lansing State Journal's massive blind spot for leftists and social justice warriors. In fact, here's what Paul Birdsong told the Lansing State Journal. Lansing as a town doesn't mean anything to me. He doesn't care. Well, no wonder he and others want to sow chaos and rioters burn and loot and steal and don't care. The place some people call home doesn't mean anything to him or them. That explains it. I played that clip earlier from the TV reporter asking Carl Menke if he thinks his job is essential to sustaining life. Our media is full of useful idiots who think they're doing the right thing, but they're either accomplices in trying to burn down our country, figuratively or literally, or they don't understand the damage their moronic interpretation of what's really going on is, quote, essential to sustaining life. When we come back, my conversation at the Capitol with the one and only Carl Menke. This is The Kyle Olson Show.